Hey guys, now back with you, and on this video it's gonna be my latest review of the latest Outsider episode, the HBO miniseries. This is episode 7 and it is called In the Pines, In the Pines. It's directed by Deanna Reed, so another director we've not had pop up before, and it's written by Dennis Lehane, I'll go with, I think. So another different writer thrown into the mix. And we're obviously getting into the end game now. We've got 3 more episodes left after this one, and this keeps up the momentum from last week, I think. As you'll know if you saw my review of episode 6, I really liked that episode. I thought it was the strongest in a while, actually, probably since the opening couple, maybe the third one as well. But really good stuff. It really got things back on track, and I think this keeps that going, really. It's the sort of episode where not too much happens, but I think there is some more kind of solid mythology in it, a bit more of Holly's like theories, but also at the same time there's a lot of tension and a lot of good drama, because I think we've gotten to the stage in this show now where I think, bar the odd like revelation, I think we're pretty much set for what exactly is going on. It's just a case of whether they can stop it or how they'll stop it if they do, and just it unfolding with the characters, finding these things out. And it's a very character driven sort of thing in many ways. So in some ways not a lot happens plot wise in this episode, but it's very compelling to watch anyway. The drama of it, I think, and the big moments land pretty damn well, so I think that's the main thing. So obviously we ended with the cliffhanger from last week, where it was Holly on a road trip with Jack, and Jack, obviously being controlled by the entity, had something bad in store for her, although we weren't quite sure what. Obviously this is all fallout from the meeting, but Holly had cottoned on to the mark on the back of his neck, and there's a bit more explanation into that in this episode. But she knew what was going on, and it was just a case of how she was going to act on it, what she was going to try and do to reverse things and get out of this sticky situation. So I'll talk about that, because that takes up the first half of the episode. And again, there's some good direction in the car scenes with Holly and Jack, like the close up on their faces and their sort of reactions. And I think what Cynthia Erivo does so well in these scenes is that she manages to be this quite sort of calm, like thinking sort of presence, always thinking like Holly does. But at the same time, you can see her maybe starting to get nervous. You can see her maybe struggling to keep control of this potential time bomb, and Jack's like fragile state of mind, and that he could just explode at any minute. So she sells that very well, and actually the actor who plays Jack is really fantastic in this episode. I think he's one of those characters that has slowly been bubbling along the last few episodes. He was a bit in and out at first, but he's a character who's sort of taken on a life of his own, and I think the actor does some great physical acting in this episode. So the stuff with Holly and Jack I really like. So Holly basically talks to him on the level. She she lets the cat out of the bag, and she knows what's going on. She knows he's being controlled by whatever this entity is. And they kind of talk to each other on the level. And again, it's a tense scene because Holly suspects something is afoot because she keeps asking how much further to the barn. And we sort of find out later that Jack had no intention of taking her to the barn. But again, you get these great little close-up shots on Holly and her kind of eyes and the way that's sold. So she's constantly trying to talk Jack down, trying to talk him around. And it's an interesting scene because they both have their own motivations, but at the same time they're kind of talking to each other, and being honest about what's going on. And Jack just looks out of it like the whole time. But Holly explains a bit more about this particular, the El Coco demon spirit, whatever you want to call it, because Jack almost like throws out these names, these almost being sarcastic, but again, I don't think he knows what exactly he's talking about. And Holly fills in some more blanks. She says that they feed on basically fear and pain, because Jack asks, well, why me at one point, and Holly says, well, that's probably why, because you have all this angst. And I think that's meant to come from his divorce, the fact that he's a very lonely guy. So Holly is saying then this particular entity fed on that and targeted that. And so she explains later on in the episode, then she feels this is kind of almost like a devil, like Jack is doing the devil's work, because she says then that the demon, or whatever term you want to use, he goes into the mark on the back of Jack's neck, and or whoever the case may be, and he can basically, or it, I keep saying he, but it can basically go inside the mind and control that and have access to the thoughts and memories. But this whole part plays out very well. Some very intense stuff in the car. So it gets to this point where Holly, I think, because I wasn't quite sure why she chose this line of action. I think it's because she gets to the stage where she's just like figured out that Jack isn't taking her to the barn, and I think it gets to the point where she feels, well, this is getting too risky now. I need to try to escape, or because I think she's been trying to talk him down without much success. So what she does is she pulls over the car. He's obviously got a gun, so it's a fragile situation. But she pulls over the car, and she comes up with the excuse then, because first of all she said she needs to go toilet, and he's like, just hold it, we need to keep going. But then she comes up with the excuse saying, which obviously is proven to be a lie, but she says, I've just had my period. And And it's kind of a funny scene, but it's sort of quite clever. It's a clever way for her to come up with this way to get out of the car, because it's almost like she shames Jack into letting her go to the bathroom at this stop point. And I think it also goes to like the whole masculinity type thing, the way Jack is so sort of masculine, and yeah, kind of certainly with his issues, he hasn't been like the most sensitive, forward thinking type guy. And I think just Holly throwing that kind of thing at him, I think it's almost like, yeah, his masculinity is challenged. And it's just this sort of like particular problem that obviously, well, it's not a problem, but related to women. So it's something that sort of shames Jack, and he's like, oh, okay, sorry, yeah, of course you can go. But he obviously keeps tabs on her. He's got a gun. And again, this being Holly, she thinks of this elaborate way to get out of the situation. And there's a detail with a key where she has like her keychain, and it's a very clever little scene, because she's obviously in the bathroom for quite a few minutes, and she's doing all these things like with the window as well, looking like she's gonna try to escape. And again, this just goes to how elaborate thinking Holly is, because what she's actually doing is that she obviously, when Jack, comes out and says, come on, it's time to go, she makes like the sound on the window like she's trying to go through the window. And that actually like averts Jack to that side of the toilet, which then means that Holly can escape through the door like the opposite way. And she runs into the car, and the next part of the scene is very interesting, and it's something which is brought up at the end of the episode, which is a very, very interesting ending. And I'll say why I think it's interesting. But Jack runs towards the car. He's obviously got a gun, but he also has the keys, and it's the keys that Holly left in the bathroom. And she's like, oh, I've got the keys, as in the keys to the car. But then she drives away, and he shoots at the car, but doesn't hit her. Like, hits the car, but doesn't really stop it. Doesn't hit Holly. So the way I read that scene was then Holly set those keys up as like a distraction. So I mean, I'm not sure it really like aids her plan that much, but I think that's meant to be what they were. Then they were Holly's keys on the keychain. I mean, maybe she just thought it would stop him for like a few seconds or something as he picked up the keys. And also just a trick to make him think then Holly didn't have, the car keys, which was still in the ignition, so she was able to drive away. But it's a very clever scene, again with good tension, because of the way it's brought back up at the end, which I'll talk about. Now Ralph gets up the next morning not really knowing what's happened, and it's actually Jenny, or Janine, who's very worried about Holly, and she actually puts it together. Well, she's in a strange city, she doesn't know anyone around here, so isn't it strange for her to be getting up this early and heading into town? And Ralph never even thought of that. He's very casual about the whole thing. He says, well, I just heard Holly get up early and she ran out. And it's only when Janine is kind of super like skeptical of this then he actually thinks it might be worth looking into. And slowly him and Alec start piecing things together because they realise, well, we can't get hold of Holly on her cell phone. We can't get hold of Jack on his cell phone. So yeah, this is suspicious. Chances are they are together. And then what happens is they put a tracker on both their phones so they can actually track them. But they're about an hour behind them at this stage. An hour, 90 minutes, I think they say at one point. But it leads to some exciting stuff because you've got them trying to catch up with them in time. And in the end, of course, Holly, because she's brilliant, kind of gets out of a jam herself. But it leads to some like great stuff with Jack as well. Like one scene when he's in the woods and he's just really frantic. He's just shaking a lot. And he doesn't know what to do at this point. He just wants the pain to end. So he has a gun and he has it to his like chin. So he's about to kill himself, but he wrestles with it, and in the end he doesn't. He just shoots the gun up into the air. Again, some really good acting by this actor. And then it's later than Holly explains some more of the mythology, talking about the devil and like, going into the back of their neck. And before this, we see Alec and Ralph go around various people when they're trying to track their location. So one interesting scene actually is that Ralph talks to the cop who recently had the baby, who knew Jack very well, and she doesn't really offer him much, but does say that Jack was behaving a bit off, but can't really give her much more. But what's interesting is, as Ralph is talking to, I think her name's like Chell, something Chaya, whichever it is, it's Jack's friend, the one who had the baby. And then we get a shot from inside the house and we see the hooded figure, and he's actually like over the cradle. Now, I wasn't sure if this was meant to be significant, like he'd actually done anything, and maybe we're going to come back to it like next episode, or whether it's just showing that its presence was there and maybe this entity was just making sure that nothing happened, like no information was given to Ralph. So if it was, it would do something. That might have been the gist of it, but they go around various places, like they go to the strip club, for example. And they don't get any lead there because Claude, the Paddy Considine character, has decided to quit the club. The stress has been getting to him so badly, he decides it's time to leave. And we see the manager of the club actually give him a nice little severance package. But obviously he's been affected by this whole thing. And like I said, there's various things with Holly, like giving them more on the theory, more on the mythology of this thing. And I think slowly they're becoming more receptive to it, although Ralph is still very sort of stubborn about it. And Holly at one point gets very upset with Ralph because he's been like sort of withholding information, because he obviously knew about like these links with the people getting affected as well, like through a touch from, so for example, Claude getting passed on from Terry, for example, when he was in the club. So stuff like that, which Holly gets mad about because Ralph didn't tell her. And we see then Janine has sort of told Holly about that stuff. And Janine, or Jeannie, I think her name is, gets really upset and just says, if we're going to crack this thing, we want you to, then you're going to need to have a rethink, and you're going to have to be open and share information with us. So another sort of like dig at Ralph, which is probably valid. We're getting this very interesting thing with Ralph where he seems to be in denial. He doesn't want to seem to accept that there is something supernatural and out of the ordinary going on. He's determined to just explain this thing away rationally. And I like the scene actually with him talking to the like his partner. I forget his name. It's like the Latino character, the one who was in Seinfeld. I think it's like Vazquez or Vez, something like that. But a really, really good scene, which again is very sort of thematic because Ralph is still makes it clear he's still very skeptical of Holly's theories, and the other detective just says, one of the difference between you and me, Ralph, is then you just want to like explain this through logic, sort of thing. Whereas I just want this whole thing to end. I just want to solve it. And I think what he's basically saying to Ralph is then by Ralph not being open-minded and being closed off to Holly's theories, even though at this point the evidence is building and kind of suggesting that she might be onto something. I think that's actually counterproductive on Ralph's point of view part, because it actually slows things down. It gets in the way of progress. And there is something to that, because even if Holly was kind of, like just batshit insane and wide of the mark, the fact is if they at least entertained her theories properly, then they could like at least eliminate it if it was wrong. But yeah, he's making the point then Ralph is very narrow-minded when it comes to these things, or he doesn't want to think outside the box. He just wants it to be the rational explanation. Whereas, yeah, he just wants the case to be solved. So if that means going down this route with Holly, then it's whichever is the best way to solve the case. So it's this interesting perspective where he's almost saying Ralph only wants to solve the case, almost if it means he's like proven right, that sort of thing. And it's another interesting episode for Ralph because we see him soul searching, we see him go to his therapist quite late in the episode, and it's partly to do with him like questioning, could there really be something like supernatural, out of the ordinary going on here? But I think it's also to do with him still trying to come to terms with his dead son. And I think that's been a really quite meaty part of this in recent episodes. But he brings up to his therapist this idea of good versus evil, this suggestion of the devil playing a part, or a devil like figure in this whole thing. So again, some good meaty stuff going on with that. And I think that's roughly it. I think couple of things with Glory. She decides to go back to work. She's an estate agent. And that's basically because she's, since Terry is now no longer around, she's running out of money to provide for her family. So she has to leave the kids with a sitter. She decides it's the right time to go home, to go back to work. And I think, although you might argue this is sort of a detail that they don't necessarily need at this stage, I think it works quite well, because she's sort of like in regular contact with the lawyer. I think it's Howard, his name, played by Bill Camp, and Bill Camp, or Howard, is pushing Glory to just sue like the department, the equivalent of the FBI in this town, just for all the harm caused. And I think because of how ridiculous they think Holly's theories is, like he thinks they've got a good case to sue, sorry, because of how they perceive them as like stepping over the line. And Glory at the start of the episode is very much no, I don't want to do that. I want to move on with my life. So she decides to go back to work because she's running out of money to provide for her family. And it goes horribly wrong because she's showing this like young couple around, and they hear about her surname, Maitland, and figure out then she's Terry's like widow. And the couple, I think this just highlights Glory's paranoia, because the couple actually don't say anything out of turn in the scene. It's like an awkward scene. I think you can tell they're uncomfortable because they know who she is. But like, I don't think they're actually judging her in the scene. I don't, or just treating her any differently. It's just an awkward moment. And I think it just goes to Glory's paranoia. She just kind of just berates them a little bit, saying, "Oh, well, you're just treating me different because I'm him," and she just kind of gives them what for, and just like crosses a line. And then it's just this funny like thing in next thing. Well, if you want me to show the bathroom, then follow me, sort of thing. But as it turns out, she did go back to work too soon. Like, she was just desperate to make a bit of money for her family. So she did do it ahead of time. And later on we see her talking to, I'm assuming, like her boss, who is very sympathetic, but she says, we can't have this. We could possibly have a lawsuit on our hands with the way you treated them. And she says, it was too soon. And she advises Glory to sell up the house, saying, actually, it would be good for you and the kids to have a fresh start. And Glory, I mean, a lot of people whose like husbands have passed on, they would want a fresh start, but Glory looks at it the other way. She says, no, me and Terry, we had our, we've raised our kids in that house. We've, lived in this house for years. And I think part of that goes back to what came out of the first episode of Terry just being this guy who was like loved around town, this very like kind of charismatic, lovable guy who was very much had roots like in the city. And Glory is just very like determined, and that is their place, that is their home, and that, yeah, it's almost about honouring Terry, the fact that she will not move. She feels the future for her and her children are actually in that town. But obviously the estate agent, her boss, is being kind of practical and considering her feelings as well. But yeah, it's interesting that Glory is just determined to stick around and make the best of it in that town. So a couple of good scenes with Glory, but the kind of thing it comes back to is then she rings the lawyer and says, "Yes, I want to sue now. Let's sue anyone or everyone possible. Just anyone responsible," is her way of thinking. But because of the way things went with her going back to work, she's decided. I think she's jumped to that out of desperation. Yeah, I really need the money. Let's sue. And obviously, there's a logical thinking behind it. Then I am sort of entitled to this. And I'm not saying I think that, but you can see why Glory might think that. And they just go through the various people who they could sue. So I guess the law case is going to be a part of this. Maybe things will change if Holly and the rest of them can fix this, can sort things out. But yeah, that's another touch. Glory and her home and professional life, and now determined to sue, I think, because she obviously needs the money. So another interesting point. And yeah, that's just about the episode, apart from the dramatic ending, which it's sort of a dream of Holly's, but one way to read it is that it's an alternative sort of version of what actually happened, like an alternative reality. It's another good like jump out if you see a horror moment, because it's a rerun of what happened with Jack in like at the stop station at the bathroom when Holly escaped. And it actually changes it, so Jack runs up to the car with the gun and he says, "I've got the keys, Holly." And he actually does have the keys in that version, so she can't drive away, and he shoots and kills her, and then she wakes up in a panic. Now, I think it probably is a dream, but I think it could be read as just an alternative version, like alternative reality, because of the whole supernatural thing that's going on. I think it could be read that way. Then, in this reality, this actually happened. Yeah, because I think because we see how smart Holly is, and she has this quite clever plan to escape. I think we go with that version of events, but it certainly could be read the other way, than she kind of forgot about him having the keys. But anyway, it's an effective ending. So some really good stuff in this episode. Again, I'm really enjoying this, and 3 more to go, so it'll be interesting how the whole thing ends. But that's episode 7 of The Outsider. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys with another Outsider review soon. Goodbye.